Hi folks, so we have a full moon in Scorpio at 2:11 p.m. Pacific time today, May the 18th, and roughly in an hour's time. And typically I do these videos a couple of days before, but in typical full moon fashion, it's happening when it is happening in the middle of juggling various things from a busyness or an activity perspective. I have rather a lot to say about this full moon. And would you do me a favor? When you listen to this video, let me know how the audio is. I did receive some feedback, which I appreciate, regarding my last video on May the 12th, that the audio may not have been that great. So, or really, to be more specific, that the audio may not have been loud enough. So the question here is, can you hear me and can you hear me clearly? And if you could let me know in the comments, that would be great. By far the most important video I have done over the past couple of weeks is the one I did on May the 12th, the last video, and I'm going to repeat some of the themes from that, or some of the things that I brought up in this particular video, but I'm going to include a link to that, the one where some folks felt that the audio was a little softer, but I think if you crank up the volume you can still hear it. But I'm going to include a link to that at the end of this video once this video is done uploading and processing and all the good stuff that YouTube does with it. Okay. Let's start to break down this full moon in Scorpio, because the activity, the energy related to this full moon is going to be around with us for another couple of weeks. So let's explain. We had a new moon in Taurus on May the 4th. Yep, it was May the 4th. Energies from that new moon, things start with a new moon. There's inspiration, there's a gradual but unmistakable acceleration of energy and activity as we get to the full moon, which is happening today, May the 18th. And then as we head to the next new moon, which will be on June the 3rd, yes, there will be a deceleration or a wrapping up. Now, this wrapping up is not really going to start for another week or so. And when it comes to the full moon, we look to things that come to us, especially from outside, things that happen 48 hours to 72 hours before full moon and 24 hours after full moon. Really, if you were to say narrow it down, I would say 48 hours before full moon to 24 hours after full moon. But it's not unusual, even 4 or 5 days before full moon, to see things start to move towards. And if you really stick with these cycles for a while, you'll become more and more attuned to what it is that the full moons and the new moons are bringing you. Whatever it is that's coming up related to the full moon, the peak or the crest of the activity for some people may already have happened 24 hours ago, within the last 24 hours, within the last 48 hours. For some people, a minority, it may happen up to 24 hours after the full moon occurs. So pay attention. There's a lot to pay attention to as we look at the time period starting, I would say, May the 9th to about May the 23rd. And again, I'm going to explain why in a second. But as far as this full moon is concerned, whatever it is that comes up with this full moon is going to take a couple of weeks to wrap up, just as whatever came up around the new moon on May the 4th will also be wrapping up over the next 2 weeks as we head to the new moon of June the 3rd. As we head towards the new moon of June the 3rd, June 1st, June 2nd, may find that the energy is really kind of flat and needing to purge this last 28-day cycle, and a need to rest and release and relax before the next cycle begins on June the 3rd. So our preoccupation, of course, is with this particular full moon in Scorpio. The moon is not happy in Scorpio. Scorpio is ruled traditionally by Mars, in modern times by Pluto as well. So some people say it's ruled by Mars and Pluto. Some people insist it's only ruled by Pluto. I would not factor out Mars. Irrespective, why is the moon unhappy in Pluto? The moon is about our sense of emotional fulfillment, peace, balance, happiness. Fulfillment, emotional fulfillment. And Scorpio is a deeply questing sign that is really interested and preoccupied by digging up the truth with a capital T, especially the psychological and emotional truth with a capital T, not so much necessarily the moral truth, but the psychological and emotional truth that sits beneath a lot of our activities and a lot of our expression and a lot of what it is that we do. The dredging up of these truths is often uncomfortable, and facing them and expressing them and communicating them is not the most comfortable of events. And these are not necessarily truths that lead to a great deal of a sense of emotional stability and fulfillment. In fact, they rock our sense of emotional stability and fulfillment, as a result of which the moon traditionally is not happy in Scorpio, which does fundamentally have a warlike quality, which does have an embattled quality. And our sense of emotional happiness and fulfillment and balance and peace is not going to come within a sign that likes to upset the apple cart and face uncomfortable truths and dig into those truths and sometimes express them with the proverbial scorpion's stingy tail. I put something up a little bit earlier today around it being a full moon, so to be careful about how it is that you express yourself, but that's a minor aspect of this particular full moon. So traditionally the full moon in Scorpio is considered a rather intense full moon and not necessarily the happiest of full moons. That said, I think that the events surrounding this full moon can be dramatic and can be important, but will still have a relatively more muted quality. Scorpio is not a loud sign. And so the things that we associate with a full moon, an increase in activity, a culmination, things getting done, things that were planned coming to a head getting done. On the positive side, projects coming to completion, offers being made, contracts being signed, things getting completed, things that have been brewing for a while, finally activities increase and they get done around the time of a full moon. On the more challenging side, there is the emotional pot coming to a boil, or things occurring that create a meltdown, because that meltdown has been brewing and has been coming for a while, but the energetic pressure cooker of a full moon needs the release of the pressure cooker, needs the release of the pressure inside, and so truths get expressed, emotional truths get expressed. You can either be the creator of a tantrum or you can be on the receiving end of a tantrum. But fundamentally, it's possible that as much as feared or disliked as a full moon in Scorpio is, it's unlikely that it's going to come with something loud. If anything, the themes of healing or reflection, or it may actually be kind of a muted and an introverted full moon. It doesn't mean that the things that are happening around it are not important. They are, or significant. They are. They may just, as busy as they are, there may be a slightly kind of hermit-like or a bedridden quality to it all. And so it's a strange quandary within this sign of the heating up of a full moon, and yet at the same time, whatever it is that's happening actually requires a certain amount of reflection and healing. The other thing about full moons is that fluids, liquids, tend to erupt. Tears and blood and bleeding and sexual activity. There's just a peak in all of that. Anything that has this kind of expressive tide-like component within the human psyche just tends to come to the fore. Anxieties get exaggerated. All that kind of full moon stuff is very much there, but still has an acutely internal and perhaps reflective quality to it. So the traditional things related to the full moon in terms of things accelerating towards this moon apply, but it's an uncomfortable moon. Scorpio is also a sign that is not only attached to deep-seated emotional and psychological truths, it's also a sign attached to mortality and the truth of death. And as a result of which, sometimes during a full moon like this, people will get intimations of mortality, illness, preoccupation, or thinking about either transformation, something dying and something new beginning, or sometimes physical death. So again, the theme of healing can be a preoccupation with, a reflectiveness around it can very much come with this full moon, depending on what your own situation is and what it is that you're dealing with. That's as far as the full moon is concerned. This full moon, as I explained in my last video around May the 12th, happens to fall roughly 2 months before the lunar eclipse in Capricorn on July the 16th. So as a recap, we had a solar eclipse in Capricorn on January the 5th. 2 months after the solar eclipse is an important date as far as I'm concerned, March the 5th. We have a lunar eclipse in Capricorn on July the 16th, and 2 months before the lunar eclipse is important in my book, May the 16th. And the week before May the 16th and the week after May the 16th, which is where we're at, and typically 2 months after a solar eclipse and 2 months before a lunar eclipse will happen around the time of a new moon for the 2 months after a solar eclipse, which is also a new moon. And the 2 months before the lunar eclipse, which is a full moon, will also happen around the time of a full moon. Understandably, there's 28 days in a lunar cycle. It won't be the exact anniversary, but it'll be off by a couple of days. So we have May the 16th as the 2-month anniversary, for lack of a better word. It's actually a good word, it's the right word, for the July 16th lunar eclipse, followed 2 days later by the full moon, in this case in Scorpio. So part of the reason why this full moon is interesting and important, and why I think it's important to reflect on some of the events that have been happening last week and this coming week, is that they may have a correlation or may be related to events that started January the 5th or occurred around January the 5th of this year, March the 5th of this year, and then around May the 16th of this year. And indeed, around May the 16th of this year, the events could be the spark, the knock, that now is going to increase in intensity and try to reach some sort of culmination around July the 16th. I would almost argue that for many people, the July the 16th date is not as important as the May 16th date, simply because whatever it is that's happening around May the 16th is what is going to try to reach some sort of acceleration and peak. And it doesn't have to reach that acceleration and peak on July the 16th. It's just around that time that it will come to some sort of culmination. So this week and next week is important. I also mentioned there was a shift of energies with Mars and Venus on the 15th of this particular month. So we've had Mars and Venus changing signs on the 15th, the 2-month anniversary of the lunar eclipse on the 16th, and the full moon now on the 18th. The next set of energetic changes will happen on the 21st, and they'll be marked with the Sun and Mercury moving into Gemini, but we'll cover that later. So the full moon remains important. It's perhaps a less externally melty down a kind of a full moon, but at the same time, there's no question that they're important, that there is an increase and a peak in activity. It doesn't necessarily have to be a peak and in stress necessarily, but it's just, things just become busier. There's just a lot more to do. And this is something that you can notice over and over again. A new moon happens, and as you get to the full moon, those 3 or 4 days before full moon and the 24 hours after, your to-do list is likely to be full. But the nature and the character of the intensity may, as busy as it is, may still have an internal and a questing and a searching and a healing quality. So pay attention to that, but even more importantly, pay attention to the stuff that has come up the week before and week after May the 16th. See if there's a correlation between whatever it is that is coming up, somehow between things that started around January the 5th, may have had another anniversary around March the 5th, and are coming up now to reach some sort of culmination by July the 16th. The eclipses in Capricorn will come up again in December of this year, in the first 6 months again of next year. So there might be a repeat. Eclipses are a time when God takes the wheel. I'm very clear about what it is that the eclipses bring. It doesn't have to be all that loud, but because I'm tracking this, it's surprising to me when I look back at the January 5th date and the week after that, the March 5th date, now the May 16th date. I'm very clear about what it is that is coming up as a knock continually. So it doesn't have to be loud. But the other important thing is that some of the things that are coming up may not be exactly what they are. So there's nothing wrong with sitting down and taking an inventory of what it is that is happening and coming up. And if you know where the eclipses are falling in Cancer and Capricorn and what that axis is and what that means in your chart, so much the better, because you might be able to hone in on the themes and where it is that these eclipses are trying to take you. Okay, well, happy full moon, if there is such a thing. For some people there will be. Certainly an important and transformational full moon, a full moon that is a culmination of a sort, a full moon that may I don't want to say result in, I'm searching for the right word, that may require, that may necessitate, that may bring releasing something to the fore. The reason why I feel like it could be a relatively muted full moon, as busy as it's going to be, is because Mars is in the sign of Capricorn, and Mars, the fiery warrior planet, is in the watery emotional sign of Capricorn. So our energy, on a certain level, it's not like we won't be busy. We will be, but 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 as we headed towards the full moon, the sheer energy that's needed to get things done has died out. I'll do a separate video on Mars and Cancer, but the ruling planet is not necessarily feeling all that active. And then the other ruler, Pluto, is very much tied to things that need to be released. So what has come up over the last 24 to 48 to 72 hours and comes up again the next 24 hours, and how can it mark some sort of an ending, some sort of a culmination, some sort of a reflection, whether it is around unmistakable emotional truths that are lingering below the surface and may have been hidden, but are things that we are not necessarily willing to confront. And in confronting, therefore, release what needs to be released. Or what is that is going on from the perspective of transformation, or even sort of bodily mortality that is coming up in such a way that it needs to be looked at and examined and accepted. And maybe there's something there that also that needs to be released. It's often the release of certain things that can create healing. This full moon may very well be that kind of a psychological marker. And as I said, for the umpteenth time, pay attention to make an inventory of things that have come up in the last week and this coming week, so that you can then see if they accelerate and reach some sort of a culmination around July the 16th. All right, I will leave it at this, and I will be back in touch. Feel free to comment, like, share, subscribe this video. I have my email address if you're interested in getting a reading, which will be in the information area here. You're welcome to go ahead and email me there. And I will be back to do another video in a couple of days' time. Thank you. Bye.